Hey everybody, I'm Daryl Cagle, and this is the CagleCast, where we're all about editorial cartoons, and we've got three very great, very conservative cartoonists. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, Daryl.
Michael Ramirez is a two-time Pulitzer winner and a good old friend of mine for many years. His work is syndicated to hundreds of newspapers by another syndicate than ours, and he's the full-time cartoonist for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is an excellent cartoon-friendly newspaper, and Michael has won ton of awards. His work is brilliant, as you will see here, and it's great to have you here, Michael.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here with the two outstanding cartoonists as well. Yeah, well, I should say three, since Daryl, of course, does cartoons as well.
Michael, here's a couple examples of yours. You've got Hunter in Biden's house, and he is in his underwear, and he says, "Hey, Dad, have you seen my laptop?" And Biden says, "No, have you seen my confidential files?" This is hilarious, and I think that it kind of brings up one of the things that I have as a liberal looking at the conservative cartoons, because so much of the Hunter Biden stuff is Biden crime family, very harsh accusations of criminality, whereas I think liberals like me kind of look at Hunter as a doofus loser figure, as you have portrayed him here, and not so much of a mafia figure.
Well, you know, he's kind of a conglomeration of both. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's $20 million of money floating out there from foreign capital, and we don't know exactly how it's been distributed. And I know Hunter's a fantastic artist, but really, if anyone, Gary, when was the last time you sold a painting for the amounts that he's getting to people that are remaining anonymous?
I told my son to forget college. I'm going to take all of his college fund now. I'm trying to save up to buy a Hunter painting.
In fact, there was that story about the legal bills, and I was thinking, what is that, like 10 paintings or something? If you look in the foreground of that cartoon, I don't know if you could see it, but I always put little Easter eggs within the cartoon itself. In the foreground, there's the cereal that's labeled flakes. Yes, Hunter is a flake, but he's a well-paid flake. And while this kind of thing has been going on in history for generations and generations, Neil Bush, Don Nixon, you could go to Hugh Rodham. Billy Carter was not an expert in Libya. And you could use your family familial connections to make money. But at this point, it's not illegal. But if you don't pay taxes on it, or if you're not registered as a foreign agent and you're doing the work of foreign entities, those are illegal. I think these things need to be looked into.
Well, it seems like the main charge against him is having a gun and lying on the application to get the gun. How do you feel about that?
Well, that is against the law. And I think it's kind of ironic that you have a president here who yells and screams anytime there's an offense with a gun, that we have to have more stricter accountability with guns, except for his son. He seems to be leaving.
That is interesting irony, but I also expect conservatives to be more forgiving of gun kind of issues.
Well, no, I think obviously one right of conservatism is responsibility for your individual action. Mm-hmm. And while I do think maybe there's perhaps an overzealous pursuit in some of these items, and he's getting a pretty hefty fine, but had he just reckoned with it and dealt with the deal that he got, he would have been pretty well off. I think the consequences of what's being charged against him now are because of his own indecision, hoping that they would wrap the entire thing in an envelope of immunity. And that wouldn't happen for any individual in the country, regardless of who they are.
Well, he's a loser and a drug addict and an albatross around Dad's neck.
And also interesting here, Daryl, is that nobody mentions that there's more than one gun involved here. I mean, there's the gun that his brother's wife inconveniently disposed in the trash bin, but there's also the gun that he was flaunting around while he was taking drugs in the photographs on his laptop.
You know, Daryl, I'm, as a gun owner, when any gun I've had to purchase, I've had to fill out all the same paperwork, background, FBI paperwork that Hunter Biden filled out. So I take it dead seriously. Everything on there, I had to answer correctly, and I would never dream of lying, or I would expect to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. So I don't think conservative gun owners look at Hunter Biden with sympathy. We look at it as ardent hypocrisy. Like Mike said, you know, his father has railed against gun owners throughout his whole life and vilified us. And here his son violates a federal law on a gun application. And
perhaps he was in a drug stupor when he filled out the application.
No, I think he was in a drug stupor when he did. And look, it's just about accountability. Nobody wants to get him because he's Hunter Biden.
They want to find the money trail
Look,
to Biden.
there are plenty of things to get Biden, that have nothing to do with Hunter whatsoever. That's sort of been my position in my cartoons.
Well,
But
I'm just
there's no
introducing you guys here, and we're spending all the time on the first cartoon. This is another wonderful Biden cartoon, Michael. We see so many cartoons with traipsing the mud around. Mud is a standard thing in cartoons, but you make this funny by really going to town on all the mud. And I think it's a wonderful cartoon. You've got the Oval Office all traipsed and footprints and handprints of mud, and aide is saying to Biden, "I see Hunter Biden came by." That's just hilarious.
The amazing thing about it is it's not even exaggerated. Whenever Hunter goes anywhere, it's funny because when you look at the plea deal that he put together, you could tell by the rejection of that plea deal while his father is running for re-election that Hunter only cares about himself. And he doesn't have any allowance for what his father's going through whatsoever.
It doesn't seem like he made that decision in his own best interest either. That just seems to be stupid.
It was a bad decision. And part of it, though, when you look at it in the context of time, was because he knew there were other charges coming along, and he had hoped that this deal would insulate him from all charges. And it was a bad decision on his part, and his lawyers as well, not to take that plea deal.
It was. Okay, our next cartoonist is Rivers. Rivers is our anonymous, brilliant conservative cartoonist here at Cagle Cartoons. And I can tell you that he has also won a ton of awards in his previous cartoonist life, which shall not be named. He was quite an award winner, and he's a good-looking fellow under the mask.
Thank you, Daryl. I don't know how to follow up with that, but
All right, so here you've got Naked Hunter, and the naked pictures are really pretty funny, and I think it's kind of a cool cartoon thing that Hunter is just portrayed naked now. It's his nature, and Biden is covering up his private parts saying, "Eyes up here." That's funny that he's just acting in his cartoon character.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was a fun cartoon, and it's very simple in its implementation, but that gets the message across.
Here's another Naked Hunter cartoon from you, Rivers. Reports suggest Hunter listed his father's house as his place of residence, and he's talking to his girlfriend saying, "Come on, baby, put down my dad's top secret stuff and blow a joint with me."
Yes, her arm conveniently placed. But yeah, it was kind of shocking when those news reports first came out. The things that they were trying to get Trump on, seems that Joe was even more guilty in a lot of ways because he wasn't president at the time. A lot of those files probably needed to be in a skiff, and here they are in his garage. So,
Hey, Rivers, if I send you $5 later, could you send me a copy of this cartoon with her arm lower?
sure.
Okay, so Gary McCoy is a brilliant conservative, and he's won a ton of awards too, including 10 silver Rubens from the National Cartoonist Society. He's also a prolific magazine cartoonist, and he draws 2 syndicated newspaper comic strips, The Duplex and The Flying McCoy Brothers, which is a crazy amount of work. But you are overall crazy, Gary.
I'm your knuckle-dragging conservative, Daryl.
Oh, we've got 3 knuckle-dragging conservatives today.
There you go.
It's very unusual for us. So here you've got a husband talking to a wife, and he's on the phone, and somebody on the phone is saying, "So we replaced the fuel filter and installed a new fan belt, but before I give you a total cost, I'd like to put my dad on the phone to say hi." And Dad says, "Howdy." And the guy says, "I blame Hunter Biden for this." That is what Hunter does. He puts Dad on to say hi when he has business calls.
Yeah, that's just, it's so funny how they tried to explain that away, that, he's just being a nice old guy, just getting on the phone, and he happens to be around at all these, accessible at all these crucial business meetings to jump on and extend his friendliness. But
Well, that's really all he needed, was to jump on and say hi.
yeah.
Here's another Hunter from you. You got the guy sitting at the counter at the diner. First guy says, "Hunter Biden won't even acknowledge that his little girl's his. How do you think that makes her feel?" Other guy says, "Probably thrilled," as he looks at the newspaper saying, "Hunter Biden, hookers, drugs, grift, gun form, lies, corrupt business."
Yeah. Can we just put my cartoon up for a second and go back to Rivers and Mike's cartoons? Because I like looking at theirs so much more.
Well, we're going to go through a whole bunch of Michael first, then we'll do Rivers, and we'll do you. So, Michael, you do lots of movie parodies, and I have noticed in our stats that movie parodies are like the most popular editorial cartoons ever.
That's what
the editors love them, the readers love them.
Well, when you think about political cartoons, the audience has to relate to it. I'm not just trying to offend people or contradict their political points. I'm trying to persuade them that if you can use iconic images that they can relate to, if they're more relatable, I think you can reach them. In this case, for this cartoon, the birds, you get the Inflation Reduction Act basically should have been called the IRS Act. It added 87,000 new IRS agents as enforcers to try to get more of our money from the government. So I thought it immediately came to mind, this image of having the IRS bird logo flopping around our heads, chasing us down to get every penny that the government thinks they deserve. One thing as a classical constitutional conservative, I need to remind people that the government works for them and that this money is actually ours and that we contribute that money so that they can provide services on a federal plane. I think the problem with the Biden administration, progressives, they seem to think it's a contrary idea.
I think this is a great cartoon, and the IRS is certainly a threat hanging over our heads.
Although you have to be careful. I remember when I won my second Pulitzer, Bill Clinton actually sent me he was nice enough to send me a congratulatory note. And so I gathered all my Clinton cartoons, and I wrote him a little note back that said, "Thank you, I couldn't have done it without you." Which I thought it was funny at the time until I got audited 3 months later. So
Wow, really?
I don't know if the things were related, but fortunately I've got a great account.
Here's another movie cartoon from you. You've got Independence Day shooting its beam down on the White House, and the aliens are Bidenomics, and it's Independence Day coming November 2024. This looks great.
That is great.
Bidenomics is going to be his doom, I guess, because people are unhappy with the economy, no matter how much he claims it's good.
Well, rightfully so. I mean, when you go to the grocery store, if you go to the gas station, you'll know that the price that we're paying for any kind of commodities, our groceries, is ridiculous. The interesting thing about this cartoon was I had just started doing the Tuesday cartoons for the Washington Post because they wanted to have a conservative voice on the page. And when this cartoon came out, which was on July 4th, thus Independence Day, we actually had Democrat members of the Congress protesting, having a contrary opinion on the editorial page. Wow.
Most newspapers are rural and suburban newspapers. They tend to be small and have a conservative audience. So contrary to what some people scream, most newspapers are conservative. And I have certainly noted that conservative papers lean more to not doing the left and right, but rather more just the right, rather than the liberal papers that like to have both left and right.
Yeah, well, that may be true, but let me disagree about what should be the objective content of newspapers. And the reason why the perception is that it's very liberal because it's dominated by the liberal media organizations. In fact, Michael Walsh is writing a great book about that right now that I'm going to be doing a cover.
Well, it depends on what it is. If it's small newspapers or talk radio, it's not dominated by the liberals.
Well, I mean, but talk radio, I think, is a different animal altogether. We're talking about news.
Well, small newspapers are a different animal than the big media companies.
Well, no,
although they're owned by
chains. The big media companies dominate because they control most of the organs that distribute the news, for like the AP, New York Times syndication. So they don't have huge staffs to be able to cover these broader events. So they're covered by little organization. And unfortunately, rather than giving an objective view, they have kind of a political agenda behind what they're doing. I think that's why we're having an erosion in the credibility of the news and newspapers, and why people are trusting the media almost as little as politicians.
Well, I would also argue what we're seeing with newspapers is that both the left and the right newspapers are tending to print the same cartoons now, which are the opinionless cartoons that are little gag jokes. There had been a time where we saw a real distinction between liberal and conservative cartoons by what the position of the paper is, and I think that's pretty much gone now.
I think
everything is just sweet.
It is unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate because, I'm kind of the old school journalist. I'm the old farts group here, but I believe in the journalistic intent of political cartoons, that they should be substantive.
Well, I'm afraid we're losing that. The substance is what we're losing first. And then once we turn into gag cartoonists, there's no difference between us and magazines and greeting cards, and that's how I fear our profession is going to sink.
Now, I've got to come from the point of view that I don't really look at other cartoons, so I don't know what's really going out there. But I can tell you this: I've never pulled a punch, and my circulation of my cartoons seem to be going fine.
Well, look at the other cartoonists in the Washington Post that have regular contracts with them like you do. Half of them are very different. They are just gag cartoons that don't even relate to opinions in the news.
Well, again, I don't look at the other cartoons, but Ann Tellnose is there, Michael Deatter. I think they're pretty
They're both very good. Look at the other three. It's gag cartoons. They're good gag cartoons, but they disappoint me.
You're just disappointed because you're a capitalist pig who's hiding as a liberal, and you're just sad you're not monetizing more cartoons. Come on, face it, Daryl. Deep down, you are a conservative. You hate to admit it.
Well, I run a small business, which makes me at least half conservative. This is, you've got Biden and Trump as those evil twins in The Shining, and that is just hilarious and so true that we are stuck with this choice in the next election. That's a great way of portraying it as an ugly choice.
Pretty amazing that when a population of 320 million people, this is really the best.
It's terrible.
I mean, when
do you have any comment on that, guys?
I love the print on the wall. It's great.
When you think about it, there's so much discourse about Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was probably my favorite modern president. But both of these candidates will be older than Reagan was when he left office, when they enter office. And it seems to me that we could probably do a little bit better.
I agree with you, Mike. I mean, obviously, we have two very old guys who are at the top right now running. I had plenty of criticism for Trump. And Daryl's heard me say this before. And again, I would rather have someone younger in office running instead of Trump. He's just so toxic. He's so tainted by all the scandal, by his personality, by everything. And the media, the liberal media, which kind of dominates the airwaves, just has a nonstop drumbeat against him. But if you just look at how the world has, gone to hell since Biden got in office, and I think people it's a stark contrast. Again, I was originally a never Trumper. I came on board when Hillary became the nominee. And then my cartoons have, changed over to be very pro-Trump when he was in office. But my gosh, this Biden is just, running the country to the ground, and the world, again, is falling apart, going to hell. And,
Gary, I got to say, I noticed something different from your cartoons. I find remarkably few Trump cartoons from you. And I recall how most of the liberal cartoonists didn't draw Hillary cartoons and don't draw Biden cartoons very much. And, it's a big reason I wanted to have you three guys on, because we've been doing all these Trump cartoons, and I'd like to answer it with some Biden cartoons. But I did not see Trump cartoons from you, Gary.
You mean pro-Trump when he was running?
No, any kind of Trump cartoons. You just go silent on him like the liberals did on Hillary and do on Biden.
Can I interject here? I'm an old guy too. And back in the day, when Clinton was the president, I drew cartoons on Clinton. When Bush was the president, I drew cartoons on Bush. When Obama was the president, I drew cartoons on Obama. I did not draw cartoons on the opposition. And I think that is a fair place to be. Who's currently in office? Biden. So why is it that most liberal cartoonists focus their cartoons on Trump? Doesn't make any sense to me.
And Daryl, really, it's a byproduct of your philosophical foundation. I had a good friend of mine who was governor of Tennessee, Don Sundquist. He was a Republican governor of Tennessee. And if he did something I disagreed with, I would do a cartoon on him because it's based on issues and not personality. And Don would complain about it. And, we'd have dinner and he'd say, why do you do these cartoons? And I'd say, look, Don, if you never want me to do another cartoon on you, I promise I won't. All you have to do is call me up and check with me first to pass all the legislation that I agree with, and I'll never do it. But I'm an equal opportunity offender. When I do Trump cartoons, people call me a rhino. That's absolutely true. I am a Republican at name. I'm a constitutional conservative and a free market capitalist.
And I do appreciate that you draw lots of Trump cartoons.
And if you defy the fundamental beliefs that you see, my problem with Trump And Gary is right. In 2.5 years, it has just been a disaster, this third Obama term. And there's no question that these policies do not work. But there are policy disagreements that I can have with any president. I did cartoons on Reagan when he was president as well. The fundamental ideas, like these tariffs, reason why our economy did so well when Trump took over was because Congress lifted $1.3 trillion of regulatory burden off the backs of businesses. That was not a very, that was a very conservative thing to do. When you had started this trade war, and I'm opposed to China, and I think we ought to go out. But when you try to do it with tariffs, you added $900 billion worth of expenses on the back of American businesses. China didn't pay that. I mean, Xi is not elected. They just upped the amount of costs for whatever products are in our supply chain. And if you notice, the Biden administration has continued those tariffs because it's antithetical to free market policies. These things are not about personalities, they're about issues. And when we disagree, it doesn't matter who that person is. They're going to be on the receiving end of a cartoon.
So we've got a West Wing Story cartoon movie poster for Biden, who is dancing and singing. Oh, I don't know that I want to sing this.
Deficit free in America. No comes free in America. Everything is free in America. You can trust me in America. And I thought it was a perfect analogy because, frankly, all those things are lies. And they can make an entire musical of lies that this administration has told them.
So now we're moving to Rivers. You've got the Dinosaur Museum and the Joe Biden exhibit in the next room. Whole bunch of dinosaurs in this museum.
Right. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a bit of a gag.
Okay. Mexican scientists suggest more testing be done to determine the age of the ancient alien artifact. This is an ancient alien, and Biden says, you want to do what with that probe? I worry about these probes.
I wonder how much that artifact made being part of the Biden family, too. A few $1,000s worth of Chinese stuff.
So here you've got Biden in a pot on the stove with a fork stuck in it, and it says he's done. How is he done?
So I consider this kind of a prophetic cartoon in a sense. A lot of liberals would have disagreed with me at the time, but it seems to me that there is a lot of evidence implicating him that is beginning to kind of leak out bit by bit. And by the time we get to 2024, I have a feeling that he may not even make it, just simply because of what's out there. So that's the cartoon that I did over about a year ago, and I'm pretty sure, like I said, that a lot of people would say it's a little preemptive, but I think it's dead on.
Yeah, I don't see any money trail leading to Biden yet. This is in your bubble.
Well, there's definitely a lot of evidence showing that there seems to be some of his influence, if you want to call it that, within the family. That money seems, as Michael alluded to before, there seems to be a huge amount of money that has come the Biden's way. That we really don't know how that arrived, what he did for it. It seems that we are slowly, as I said, drip by drip, getting more and more further on down the road to seeing that he's not really the kind of guy that the Democrats should be, putting all of their eggs in his basket, so to speak.
We can only dream.
And frankly, with that $20 million, that's a known quantity. Mm-hmm. $20 million is there now. There are no direct links to the president himself. But that certainly entails closer examination, I think.
So here you've got the evil-looking puppeteer's hand, and Marionette Biden says, they told me to tell you you're an insurrectionist if you see strings. So explain this to me. This, I think, is another bubble cartoon. Who is the puppeteer controlling Biden?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think anybody really knows who the puppeteer is. I think there's been some, talk that it's Obama's third term. That it might be Obama, but Joe Biden
is this just because you feel so clearly Biden is demented that there must be somebody controlling him, because otherwise how could he make rational choices?
Well, it seems, as I was saying, it seems to me that he seems to have a lot of handlers, people that tell him what to do, and we don't know who those people are. When the Easter Bunny tells him, go this way, or when he says, they're telling me to answer questions from this journalist or that journalist. Well, I want to know, who are they?
Those are the handlers. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry, Rivers. That's Daryl. That's who Rivers is referring to. The people when Joe Biden at the end of a press conference says, "Well, I'm going to get in trouble if I say anything else," or they gave me a list here of who I'm supposed to call on. There's somebody behind him that has authority over him because he explicitly references some other entity that said, "I'm going to get in trouble if I do this."
To my ear, that just sounds kind of crazy.
Well, frankly speaking, if he had the Easter Bunny in his administration, he'd be one of the more competent members.
Okay, so here he's riding a giant banana, Biden is, and he says, "Hi-yo, banana republic." That's because, of course, we're on fast track to becoming a banana republic with all of his poor decisions.
Well, I that cartoon was drawn right after Trump was indicted for about the 30,000th time. So it's just one of those, why are they going after Trump? It seems that it's very convenient in terms of timing. They seem to be weaponizing the justice system. So that's where that
And you blame Biden for that. I would see that as the system just operating without his having his hand on it.
I'm not too sure that's accurate, though, Daryl. I think that there's been some reports that Biden's kind of been in contact with certain agencies, and I guess I should maybe review before I start talking, but I do recall a few months ago reading that there was some communication between Biden and the different justice departments regarding, going after Trump. So I'd have to look that up again and see where that was.
I think actually Biden has probably been laid off. What's been going on, because when the other team is being self-destructive, you just want to stay out of it.
So here you have Biden sniffing the butt of a giant dog.
I went there.
And the dog says, "Dude, you have a problem. Remember, I'm a dog and I'm telling you this." So he has a reputation for sniffing people, and so he's sniffing a dog. Is that the gag?
Yeah, that's exactly that, right? So, because, you've seen him, you've probably been on social media and you see videos of him sniffing different people, one after another, children and young women, and of course, it's kind of creepy.
He is a creepy sniffer. And here, we did a whole podcast on how you oppose aid to Ukraine. And this is a cartoon depicting that. You've got him as George Washington crossing the Delaware on the Ukraine boat. And one of the people in the boat says, "I thought he was an American president." They have the Ukraine flag.
Well, somebody pointed out, he seems to be more concerned with the Ukraine border than he is with the American border. And certainly a lot of tax dollars have ended up in the Ukraine. So I suppose you could make an argument for that.
I thought this cartoon was great. You've got Biden as the musician sawing Uncle Sam in half, and Uncle Sam's limbs are coming out of the box in a way that is funny. And Biden says, "Want to see how this ends? Tune in again in 2024 and see how I pull a rabbit out of one of Sam's orifices." That's a very funny cartoon. I like how when you cut Uncle Sam in half, his torso just has this big bone in the middle of it.
Right. Didn't want to get too graphic.
Great looking cartoon.
That really is a wonderful cartoon.
Thank you.
So here you have Biden golfing behind a giant football player as a new football season begins. Biden is looking a bit like Mr. Magoo, not knowing what he's doing, about to swing his club into this giant football player. Is this a dementia cartoon?
A little bit, yeah. And then it was the start of the NFL, and I was kind of excited about that, so I decided to mix the metaphor a little bit. Yeah. Works well.
Yeah, no, it works really well.
Big football player. Newspapers love big football players. Even when you mix them with dementia. All right, here you got the FBI, and they're pulling the cover off of all of the stinking garbage. When FBI guy says, "When you joined the FBI, did you imagine having to spend a good part of your career covering up for the Bidens?" How is the FBI covering up for the Biden?
Okay, well, we can start with the Hunter Biden laptop story that was covered up by the FBI. They seem to have known that the evidence was there, and they did what they came out with was 51 agencies had reported that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, because they like to use the Russians. So it's kind of their go-to. So that's where this cartoon came from. It seems to me that the FBI does spend a lot of time covering up for the Bidens, but that's because I live in a bubble.
And here you have the elephant on top of the Biden corruption and evidence. He thinks I'd do something if only I had more evidence. And there's so much Biden corruption evidence. Another bubble cartoon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, again, I see. As Michael alluded to earlier, again, that $20 million, there's a lot there if you're looking. The question is, does the media and does the Justice Department have the desire to actually go after these stories in the same vigor that they went after Trump?
This is interesting. You've got Uncle Sam digging through at the edge of the cliff, about to fall down from the cliff, and Biden says, keep digging, you'll eventually hit pay dirt, and then it's nothing but blue skies after that.
So it's a bit of a gag. Yeah, it's a bit of a gag. The U.S. is kind of digging its way into deeper and deeper issues and troubles. We're not going the right way.
So, Gary, we're up to you.
Yay.
I know we're pushing up against your deadline.
Yeah, so especially since I don't like my drawing, and I'm not the draftsman that Rivers and Mike are. So what I do is I try to make up for that by being a better citizen, and
you're a better citizen.
Yeah,
okay.
A model partner to my community. Okay, so anyway, I hate this drawing, but let's go, sir.
So you've got Biden at the desk, and two Secret Service guys are getting bit by his dog that famously bites. And he says, sir, never mind the border. We'd like to request that a wall be built around Commander.
Just a gag cartoon, of course. That's kind of my thing. Plus, I try to keep in mind what you say, Daryl, about the editors. And
I don't want to be in the position of telling you to not have opinions. I mean, cartoonists should have opinions, and we should be twisting the arms of editors to print opinions.
I do. I know. And, I wish I could, Mike Rivers hit the topic so hard, and I do in some of these cartoons perhaps, but, when you can cross-reference two topical things going on at the same time, it's probably an easy go-to for cartoonists.
And you know what? I think that cartoon hilariously brings up the context of the border wall and another event that's happening in the news at the same time. So he's saying that Biden has done nothing with the border wall. Could he at least build a border around Commander? I think, one thing I loved about Ronald Reagan was his sense of humor. And humor is a very, very, very powerful weapon to reach a much larger audience with your weapon, with your message. And I think one thing I love about Gary's cartoons, and I don't see them a lot, Gary, but when I do, they always make me laugh out loud, is that we want to be the catalyst for thought. We want to bring certain issues that I think very, very important issues to our society to the viewer's attention. And, Gary does it very well with his sense of humor. And I actually like your drawings, Gary. I think they're wonderfully creative.
I like your drawings too, Gary.
I agree.
So you've got Biden with his feet glued to the floor, and his advisor is saying, sir, it's what environmental protesters do, but gluing your feet to the floor isn't the best way to hold on to office.
Obviously, I'm just again, cross-referencing things that were topical. And I think this was around the time when the Burning Man thing was going on out in the desert, and all those people were blocking people wanting to get through. And so people just got so fed up, they just started dragging them off the road. And it's kind of what I would imagine me doing also.
Frankly, it may be the only way that Biden holds on to office.
Yeah.
Well, he's holding on to other things here. And she says, hands off my expletive. And the Secret Service guys say he's not just a gun grabber.
Yeah. Sometimes I wish I wasn't Joe Biden.
Because you can get away with grabbing?
Although, my wife probably wouldn't be too thrilled about it, but yeah.
Okay, you've got the military before Biden. The drill sergeant says, drop and give me 20. And after, drop and give me the name of a Disney princess or a preferred pronoun. All right. Here you've got Biden talking to the kid who's thinking Ku Klux Klan hood. And Biden says, don't worry, if you can't get into Harvard because of the Supreme Court ruling against affirmative action, I'll give you a job holding a lantern in my front yard. So is that funny just because you're calling him a bigot?
To me, it's not so much funny as just pointing out Biden's, veiled.
He has had some
racism.
gaffes that got him into some trouble.
Yeah. And you told me subsequent to this cartoon, Daryl, about how Klan's goods, won't make it into paper. So this one probably never ran, I guess.
Well, there's always somebody to print anything, but Klan hoods are like swastikas. Editors don't like them, and the cartoons just don't get picked up.
Yeah. And Biden just had another recent gaffe. I forget who it was. I don't know, it might have been LJL Cool J, JL. But when he said, this boy, and the guy's like 50-something years old, one of his, reoccurring kind of racial faux pas that doesn't really get much media attention.
So, Daryl, do you release a list of metaphors that your cartoonists shouldn't use? Like sodomite?
I don't want to tell the cartoonists what they should or shouldn't but I do tell them what gets printed and doesn't get printed. I send the cartoonists pretty much weekly all the top 10 cartoons that were reprinted that week that editors chose. And the top 10 cartoons from us tend to be equal in the amount of papers that print them to all the rest of the cartoons, like another 100 cartoons.
I guess my next question would be, do you guys listen to what Daryl says? No, you don't have to answer that.
Oh, I can tell you that I don't get too much people listening to that, but
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Well, I know I've changed. I mean, since you sent those emails out, Daryl, I have changed somewhat in what I submit because, I don't want to just submit a ton of stuff that's never going to get picked up. So, and again,
there is a part of being an effective cartoonist is getting people to see your cartoons.
Absolutely.
And if you can make a compromise, like saying, well, I don't really need blood in this cartoon, it does the same thing without blood, and then get it printed by twice as many places, that's not a bad compromise to make.
Although I do agree with that. I mean, I don't do controversial cartoons for the sake of controversy, just like I don't do humorous cartoons just for the sake of humor. And there are certain subjects that you just don't want to do because the controversy surrounding the placement within the cartoon will overshadow the point you're trying to make. Because obviously we're trying to make a point. But
one problem that we have is anti-Semitic cartoons, particularly from around the world. And I've tried to lay down some rules for the international cartoonists to follow to make their cartoons not anti-Semitic. And I do kill the anti-Semitic cartoons. There are some basic rules that I think are helpful, just as you wouldn't draw sexually explicit things in an editorial cartoon and expect it to be printed. Likewise, some of these things that are natural go-to kind of things that pop into artists' minds, like drawing Israelis as Nazis persecuting the Palestinians in Gaza, Auschwitz, we don't accept that. And we need to explain to the cartoonists that, there's a range of those things from slight to heavy, and cartoonists should know that some things cross the line and some things are inappropriate and some things we'll tolerate, but they simply mean your cartoon's not going to get printed, and that's another way of being an ineffective cartoonist.
I'm a big believer in freedom of speech, that people can say and do anything. That does not give you the freedom to be insulated from the consequences of what you do.
Right.
Yes.
I'm sure that Gary and Rivers are like me. We think about our audience and how the cartoon is going to be read out there by our readership. And, I don't want to offend anybody just to make a point. The point is the most important thing. I mean, I always think of political cartoons like a Super Bowl ad. You got 5 seconds to catch their attention, 5 seconds to make the pitch. But instead of selling a product, we're selling ideas. If you offend their sensibilities with something that really doesn't have much to do with the content of your point, then you lose the opportunity to make the sale.
That's a good point.
And you can judge how much you want to offend. I recall one of your cartoons when you were on our Cagle.com site. You drew a dead fetus in an electric chair. And we got more angry mail for that than I think any cartoon we've ever had on Cagle.com. People were just outraged. But, we ran it, and I'm not sure that you would have been disappointed with the outrage.
Well, I don't recall that cartoon. I've been picketed by everybody, sometimes at the same time. I managed to offend everybody at some time. But, it's sort of like why I would never use Muhammad in a cartoon, because the controversy that's surrounding the image would overshadow any point that I'm making. So I have a tendency to try to sidestep those, but I'm not afraid to, like the fist bump cartoon, like the cartoon that I just did on Hamas with the bloody teddy bear. Sometimes you have to get right up to the edge of the limit to make a powerful point. I think that's worth it.
Well, if you're going to draw something that's going to be very offensive to a minority of readers, I think it's worth thinking about what's the value of being offensive, and can I say this in another way?
Right, and let me say that I'm not trying to be offensive. Maybe shocking to some people, but politics is an emotional thing. When people write me hate mail and stuff, I like it. They're like the medals that you get in a battle. But you're not doing it to offend people. You're trying to convince them. And I'm not drawing offensive cartoons. I'm drawing powerful cartoons sometimes.
Well, sometimes there are cartoons that are drawn to be offensive to show that they can do it.
Yeah, I would discourage that.
Gotta wrap it up, Daryl.
Okay, I guess I'm going to wrap it up. Any last comments, gentlemen?
I just want to say I had a great time. It's fascinating listening to these guys talk and kind of analyze stuff. And
you guys were all very civilized, and we didn't have much argument.
We'll bring another liberal on time, Daryl.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm a big fan of both these guys, and so there's a lot of respect there. And I really appreciate Michael coming on today because, of course, he's outside of the Cagle group, but just an awesome cartoonist, and it's been great to hear from you today, and you're very articulate. And, of course, Gary and I are friends from way back, and it's always good to see my friend Gary.
And same with Mike. Mike and I go way back, and it's a mutual love thing here.
The McCoy brothers are almost part of my extended family. It's like
gives his regards.
Look forward to seeing you without mask at some point. I've come from a place in the political spectrum. I'm probably to the right of both you, although I'm the guy who will go after everything. You can vehemently disagree with the politics behind a cartoon and still love the cartoon or the cartoonist. I don't like to tear down other people's work, but I'd like to say that politics is a personal thing, and everybody should be emotional about how they feel. And just because I don't agree with what's behind the cartoon, it doesn't mean that the cartoon is not comprehensible or not a powerful vehicle to make a point of view. And, I like both these guys are fabulous cartoonists. I'm honored to be on this.
I really appreciate your coming on, and I'm going to get 2 podcasts out of this. So thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. I got to run. Love all you guys, and see y'all soon.
Okay, very good. Well, let me say that everyone should remember to subscribe to the CagleCast wherever you're watching or listening today. Please subscribe. Our CagleCast is available in both video and audio versions, so if you don't see the cartoons, go to cagle.com or Apple Podcasts or YouTube or Spotify to see the video podcast rather than just the sound. And I kind of like Podcruncher. That's my favorite one. But we're on all the platforms, and thank you for being here. And Michael, I'm delighted that you came today.
Sounds good.
Thanks a lot. We'll talk soon.
Bye.